Welcome to episode 198 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and producer Shane Abbess. He recently did a sci-fi film called The Osiris Child. We talk about writing the script and then also how he was able to get this film financed and produced. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 198. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a quick few words about what I'm working on. A quick update on The Pinch, the crime action thriller feature film that I'm finishing up on. I am making some good progress on it. I got a trailer cut last week. I will link to that in the show notes. So if you're interested in getting a look at the first trailer, have a look at that. It's starting to feel like it's coming together, which is really great. Making the movie has it's a lot of moving parts and it takes a long time. I mean, I've been talking about it on this podcast for now, we're talking about years. And especially when the budget is so low, you really have to go slowly and you don't just have money to throw at a project. And oftentimes that can really speed things up. So it's been a long process and it's really starting to feel like it's coming together. I mentioned this last week, but basically I'm just waiting for now the final sound mix. I have a cut of the film that's basically complete with a few minor glitches. And once the sound mix is done, I will fix up those glitches and we'll get the sound all done. But I'm basically going to start having some conversations, hopefully this week or next, just depending how much time I have to start having conversations with some distributors, just to start to see what kind of a reaction I'm going to be getting from distributors and see if there's any that might be interested in taking this movie on. This is really where the real work comes in. It's going to be a lot of hard work and, a lot of conversations and a lot of rejection because the vast majority of the distributors that I talk to, if not all of them, will probably not want to distribute this movie just because there's no cast. I think is going to be the biggest, stumbling block that I run into. There's no name cast in it, and that's from a distributor standpoint, that's important for them to sell the film. So that leads me to my next point, which, I do feel like this current cut of the film that I have, which is color corrected and has all the sound pieces, although the sound isn't mixed, I feel like that is good enough to start submitting to film festivals. So I am going to start doing that this week or next as well. Maybe I'll talk to distributors first, spend a week or two talking to distributors, and then maybe I'll start submitting to film festivals. But I do think if I can get a little buzz on the film festival circuit, if distributors can see, hopefully audiences will like this movie and distributors can see that audiences are liking it, they might be more inclined to pick it up and take a chance on a film like this. So that's kind of my strategy. Have some conversations with distributors, see what kind of reaction I get from them. If I don't get some sort of a deal, then definitely hit the festival circuit hard and see if I can't build a little buzz that way. And then ultimately I'll have to just figure out what my best options are after that. It's very hard to tell at this point, where it's all going to end up. But as I said, this is kind of the exciting part. It's all starting to coalesce, and that's very gratifying just to kind of see things come together. And, just all the hard work just makes me feel like it is worth it. And there are a lot of moments when you're in the middle of this process where you just feel like it's never going to be over. And now I just really feel like I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. So that's a great feeling. I mentioned this a couple of months ago, and I'm going to mention it again. If you have some experience with film festivals, please do drop me an email. It's very hard to tell when you go into Without a Box or Film Freeway. It's hard to tell, how good these festivals are and if they're even worth entering. I've submitted and been to a number of film festivals that, quite frankly, are not worth entering. But you usually don't know that until you actually go to the festival. So if you have some experience with a particular festival, do shoot me an email and just tell me, yeah, this festival is good and this is probably worth entering, because that firsthand sort of information you can only get by really experiencing it. And so if you have some experience with a festival, please do let me know. Again, I just want to mention the webinar I did a couple of months ago on The Pinch. It's called The Pinch, Producing a Micro-Budget Feature Film. I go into great detail on exactly how I wrote, directed, and produced this micro-budget film. Specifically, I talk about how to write a micro-budget screenplay, how to raise money to shoot your micro-budget screenplay, which includes a lot of information about how I ran a successful Kickstarter campaign, which I did for The Pinch. And then I also dig into pre-production, production, and of course, post-production. The webinar is over 3 hours long, so there's a ton of very useful information in it. I worked hard putting this webinar together, so I am charging a small fee to view it. But if you're looking to write, direct, and or produce a micro-budget film, I think this could really help you. There are a ton of directors and producers out there looking for the next great micro-budget script. So even if you're just a writer who's looking to understand this market better, I think this webinar could be valuable to you as well, even if you don't have any intention of producing your own material. If you just want to learn about how to write a micro-budget film, going through a webinar like this will give you some real nuts and bolts information on sort of production and understanding, translating that script to a produced movie. I think writing scripts that can be shot on a micro-budget level is a great way to meet up-and-coming directors and producers and get some produced writing credits. You can find this webinar at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and the word The Pinch is all lowercase and all one word. I will, of course, also link to it in the show notes. Anyway, so that's an update on what I am working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer, director, producer Shane Abbess. Here is the interview. Welcome, Shane, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
It's great to be here. Great to be on.
Perfect. Yeah, glad to have you. So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I always used to look at movies with this real sense of how do you be part. I was always a storyteller. So I was always the kid that would sit around and put on puppet shows and try to keep people entertained, just to get through their hours of school or lunch times or whatever it was when we were really young. So for me, it was a natural evolution just to keep wanting to tell stories. And then, I remember all the films I grew up with, I would always say to my parents, how do you do that? And I thought, do you be a camera person? Do you have to write a script? Do you direct? Do you edit? And it turns out it's all those things. All those things, all those people are storytellers. Everyone on the set, every single person's a storyteller. So there's this interesting sort of thing that comes from that where you get into it and you write. I wrote a lot in the early days for myself, and I'd write short stories, and then I looked at scripts, and scripts are very different, obviously, to writing a book or a novel or something like that. But it was a really great outlet. Like I wrote, when I was in my teenage years, all through high school, I'd just write scripts for films that were never going to get made, but I literally write it as a script and imagine how the film would look and what happened in it, and I'd actually kind of entertain myself and then just put it away and write a new one. So there was a real, I was always drawn to just storytelling in general. It didn't matter what aspect of it was. It sort of always excited me.
Yeah. And so and I know we're tight on time here, but just maybe in a nutshell, what were some of your first steps to actually turn it into a career? It sounds like your whole life you just enjoyed writing, you enjoyed storytelling. So then what were those sort of steps, actual tactical steps that you made to actually turn this into a career?
Well, I think there's two different. I mean, I've worked with some of the best writers, Ben Ripley and Billy Ray and guys like that who are professional, like top tier Hollywood sort of writers. And for me, I knew really early on that I was going to direct as well. So I was a different type of writer in the sense that I wasn't someone that was just going to write scripts and put them out there. I was a writer director that would kind of more do it for myself to entertain myself, because there's also writers when you meet with some of the best writers in Hollywood, and those guys and girls that have honed that craft over 20, 30 years, and there's such a beauty to their kind of work that for me it's more about learning from them and sort of seeing that. So in terms of making it into it's more for me, it's I'll direct a film without a script, or I'll write a script out of an idea that I don't think anyone else is telling at that time. So in terms of getting it actually made, it's a script without any support is nothing, you know. And it's amazing that I've read a phenomenal scripts that don't have the support. And I think the fortunate / unfortunate thing that's happening in the world right now, especially for writers on screenplays, is, you know, people are forced to understand the business a lot more. They're forced to. You can't just write a great screenplay, give it to someone and go, that'll find its way into the world, because it won't. You know, in my opinion, it won't. It has to find. You have to write a lot. You know, if you're going to be a writer, you have to write a lot. People have to know that you have the care and dedication to doing that. And that was something that I did a lot back in my early days. Is when I would write, I wouldn't just write something and go, well, I've written it, so it must be good. I'd write it and say, it's probably terrible. Can you guys tell me how to make it better? And I took a lot of criticism to heart in the right way, that I kept working at. I looked at the best scripts that other people considered to be the best, and looked at where I was falling short or failing. And then took a really critical eye to that. And then when it actually came time to getting into, you know, getting these things made, it was about finding producers that had the same kind of mindset as myself. So, you know, it wasn't sending the wrong type of script to the wrong type of producer. It was finding, and I've learned on everything that there's not everyone loves the script. I mean, I'm working now on a Blacklist script. Not that I didn't write, but it was already picked up off a wonderful writer called Joel Dorland. And it's amazing seeing people's different interpretations of that script. And I read it as a very tonally, very different film to what other people saw it as, but we've all come together to make the same film now. So I think, you know, opinions, the joke is, you know, opinions are like arseholes, everyone has one. But I think with your writing, there's two truths. There's a truth where you inherently know in yourself, is this amazing in the right hands? And then that's the sense of the team around it, the right producers, the right director, the right financier. Or is this just an amazing script, bar none, and everyone's just going to get behind it because it works on maybe some more easy, accessible commercial levels, you know? So they're all things that I have to think about, like, especially when I'm writing, is who wants to see this? Who am I actually writing this for? So in a film like Osiris, Child Dawn was just done, there was a dual layer there, which was trying to experiment a lot, because one of the things of all my years in Hollywood was I would get the same development node from 10 different people across many, many years. So you kind of go, okay, so there's a formula to screenwriting, but what happens if I don't want to do that? What happens if, like, I want to not put the chorus here? Like, do I have to put the chorus there? Well, if you want anyone to watch your film, you do. And then I'd sort of think, I don't agree with that. Like, I don't feel it needs to be that way, you know. And I think there's so many different ways of putting your film out there now. I think there's never been more exciting time for writers to experiment and do different things, because the environment of the business is so risk averse now. It's so scared of it has to be a $200 million film. You can't take that big a risk on a $200 million film because you need a lot of people to see it. I get it. Or it's so small and indie and bizarre that you kind of can just go crazy in the indie space because there's not the budgets there to support big ideas anymore anyway. So I think it's, you know, for young writers, it's about finding a great team in the indie space. You know, if you really want to see your stuff get made, and figure out how to get it made with people that know how to do it, or, you know, do the old Hollywood thing and write 10 or 15 scripts that are amazing and hope one gets picked up. So it's you know, it's winning the lottery either way. It sort of feels like. It always felt like to me.
Yeah. So let's dig into the Osiris Child. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick log line for it. Kind of just tell us what the pitch is for this film.
The pitch was always it was a father and daughter sort of relationship and a guy who turns his back on his entire way of life, a terrible dad, has to join forces with the very type of person that he disdains, who actually is probably more suitable for the father role than he is. And together, you know, for different reasons, they've got to go and rescue this daughter from a pending global crisis. But, you know, the 80s nature of the film and the 80s nature of it is the real pitch when you talk about, you know, a nuclear meltdown on a planet that you've got to outrun monsters and an evil corporation. It sounds really bad, but that's actually what the film is, you know, because that's the fun of that 80s naivety.
Mm-hmm. And where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis for this?
There was a lot. I used to get scripts out of order, so I'd get not scripts. Sorry, I'd always get comic books out of order in Australia because I'm obviously from Australia, hence my hard to understand accent. But I'd get issue 9 of Judge Dredd, and then I'd get issue 4, and then I'd have to wait a year because the comics wouldn't turn up or no one would send them, and then I'd get issue 20. I'd have these moments where I think, I'm sure all this other stuff has happened, but I have no idea what it is. So I have to invent that myself. I have to imagine what happened between these chapters. And I always said it'd be really fun to do a movie where the very last chapter of the film is the first chapter of the comic. So everyone reads the comic and then gets to the end and goes, does the origin of this character change the way you feel about them? Which in this case is Sci. And that was a big thing for us was to get an example of who the characters were, then get to the very end and have no idea who they really were at all. This was also an origin story, so this is the first part of a 5-part story. So there wasn't to have a neat 3-act kind of, bam, we were done. It was always to just kind of open into something bigger. So that's kind of where it's headed. It's not a standalone film at all.
Yeah. Now, I noticed that on the IMDb, it looks like this is positioned as a, one movie in a whole series of movies. And I'm just kind of curious what your thought process is there for a film like this. Do you have the sequels already sort of planned out? Maybe just walk us through that process a little bit.
Yeah, we planned 5 stories. Brian, who's the co-writer, and I, we planned 5 stories out along the way. So we knew what the bigger arc of the film would be and that this would be the origin story. And again, you have to, when you're writing, just take into account what's your budget, how can you make it, what are you going to do with it. So we sort of thought about all that and sort of made sure the arc was long enough to do it. And I think because of television, that was a big thing for us, is now I find with writing, especially in movies, I'm so aware as the audience of, here's the one scene you can do where they have a connect. Here's the one scene where the bad guy gets set up. Here's the one scene where, and you're kind of thinking, wow, on television, you can spend 2 hours on that. Look at Game of Thrones. That's setting up themes that go for years, which you would have to cram into a movie in just one scene and try and tell it all, and you don't feel it at the same level. So for us, we sort of like this idea of telling it across volumes, and without any care in the world for box office or success or whatnot. It's like we're just going to keep making the stories as we go, and then we know there's an audience there obviously for it. We knew from the time the film first premiered at Fantastic Fest, there was a great audience that wanted to see part 2, but we were committed to it no matter what, and I think that was the thing of doing this, is we didn't want to try and jam everything in the first film on the risk that we only get to make one. We just didn't really care. We just said, well, even if we're doing this with matchsticks, with an iPhone, we're still going to keep telling the story. So, that was that was how it was done. There was a sense of destiny to it. I think you have to have the bravado, humility, but bravado to, like, if you want to try and compete in the world today, you've got to have something that's got a bit more of longevity to it, rather than it's just a movie. This is buying into a much bigger thing.
Yeah. So did you have, just talk about sort of the process of bringing the script to life. Did you have financing in place? You keep talking about this we and this team that you have. Did you guys have this film financed as you were writing the script? Did you write the script and then go out and look for financing?
No, we had the script. We already had the script, and the director's a big part of your script. So obviously, because I'm directing as well, it helps me because I know that part, of it. But if you're just writing solo, you've got to have great producers and director with you that knows the end goal of where this is headed. So that's something that I guess that's for that long blur before, but that's really where I was headed with it. You've got to know what your end goal is. Are you trying to get to write Star Wars? Or are you trying to do indie films with a flavour? Are you trying to do the next Shane Black? Are you trying to be Robert Talent? Where do you think you fit? Has it never happened before, what you want to do as a writer? Has it never happened before? That's all really exciting stuff. But what's the end goal of that? How do you get there to that? So I guess the answer for me on the Osiris show was we had a first draft of the script that was out of order. It was 15 chapters. And I pitched it and I said, there's huge risks in this. Let's just go into the risks of this, in terms of the narrative and the fact that it's part 1, it's not a standalone film. And I made sure that the team we had around us were ready to take those type of risks, because I couldn't pitch that to a traditional studio system because they're not going to do it. And I also couldn't look at it as like a no budget indie because the story was too big. So I knew the right team down here from Australia to work with to make that happen. So I kind of knew when we had the script who I was going to show it to and how we were going to make it, at what budget we were going to make it, even to the point of where I thought, here's how we're going to sell it as well. So They're all things I think you have to know as a writer in this day and age. Now you have to know where the end game is, because the traffic is there's so many scripts, there's so many things coming and going. I mean, for me, it has to come through my agent, highly recommended, and be something that he knows I'm going to like. And there's a lot of filters before it gets to me. So, of all the scripts that have come and gone, it has to pass through all those filters before I'll read the script. So I think that's another thing, is that's where the tenacity of writing, or the best writer, Billy Ray, or say Ben Ripley is probably a great sci-fi example. Ben Ripley is someone that back in the early days was writing and writing and writing. And he was so good. Every script was a fresh, original, interesting idea, and he never sat on it. He would put it out, someone would say, that's great, we want to make it, and he'd be on to the next idea. And then someone else would say, geez, Ben Ripley's written this great script. And then the next producer would say, no, but I've got the next great Ben Ripley script. And all of a sudden, he's in demand because many people want to do what he's doing. So, like I say, there's a lot of ways to kind of do it. For me, it's more about myself. It's more about sort of, because I'm directing and producing to a degree, I know the people I'm going to give it to by this stage in my career. Whereas when I was back in Gabrielle with the early stages, I had no idea. I wrote the film, raised the finance myself, went and directed it, and then, it all happened after that. So, we obviously had to help along the way for sure, but I have much more of an idea now of the rules and how to break them.
Yeah, sure. How can people see the Osiris Child? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be?
Yes, October in America. It's October 6th. It's out now on DirecTV. We did an exclusive window for them, and it comes out in theaters and VOD all around America on October 6th.
Okay, perfect. Shane, I really appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck with this film.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have around 400 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots. It's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. So to sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing director-producer Scott Way. He recently did a film called Six Below Miracle on the Mountain. We dig into this project and also how, as a producer and director, he finds projects like this to produce. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Shane. There's a ton of great information in this interview, but I want to highlight two things that really stuck out to me. And I know the audio was a little muffled, so I apologize for that. Hopefully you were able to hear it okay. So the first thing is, and I hope everyone really listened when he said, getting the right script to the right team. This is so important. I feel like so many new writers look at things in a much too simplistic, almost binary way. Is the script good or bad? As if that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor on whether it gets produced. But it's really not that simple. It's a lot more nuanced than that. There's a ton, first off, there's a ton of subjectivity to this. In many cases, people reading the script can't tell if it's a good script or not. I had a film noir script, which I ultimately did sell, and it was actually never, I sold it, although it was actually never produced. And I had sent this script around for years and years and years and gotten a lot, optioned it numerous times. But there's just one example of sending this out I just want to mention real quick. I sent this script out to a very successful director, and he really liked it. He called me up and was really, really high on the script, and he went and took it around to his contacts. Didn't ultimately end up panning out, but this was a really successful director, and again, he really liked the script. And after that didn't work out with that director, I had another successful producer read it, and he ended up literally telling me he thought it was complete garbage. So as writers, I think we're always filled with self-doubt, and frankly, I think the self-doubt is sometimes healthy. But after this producer told me he hated my script, I remember thinking, is it really that bad? And thankfully, I had had this director tell me that he loved the script before this producer, shit on it. So I remember just sort of thinking to myself, who is right? I mean, these were both like successful people in the industry. And honestly, looking back on it, from their perspective, I think they're probably both right. A lot of the enjoyment from a script or ultimately from a movie is about what you as a person and an audience member bring to the table as well. And I think that's what Shane is talking about here. It's not just about writing a good script, but it's about getting a good script, writing a good script and getting it to the right people who will appreciate it. Certain production companies have certain niches. They have certain types of projects that they can ultimately sell. And so again, you might send it to a production company and they might not be able to use it, but they might not even be necessarily experts at evaluating that type of material. So their opinions may not be particularly worthwhile for that particular script. So again, it's just a complex sort of nuanced thing. And it's not as simple as, is it good or is it bad? It's it's more of just the specificity of the right script with the right people. Now, this isn't to say that most scripts are good and you should just persevere no matter what people are telling you. I don't believe that, and that's not what I'm recommending. Most scripts out there, frankly, are terrible, and especially if you're new to screenwriting, you need to step back and take a long, hard look at your work. This is why I think it's important for screenwriters to enter contests and use other services like my own SYS Select or the Blacklist or Inktip or even my SYS Script Analysis service, where we will give you a grade of pass, consider, or recommend. Putting your scripts out there will start to give you some indications if your writing is up to par or not. Again, you don't want to take any one person's opinion too seriously, but hopefully if you're out there marketing your work, you'll start to get some basic consensus on where you stand. Are you starting to get past the first few rounds of screenwriting contests? And maybe not with every contest and not with every script, but maybe some of your scripts are starting to move past those first rounds of contests. Are you getting some considers from various script analysis services like the SYS Script Analysis Service? Are you starting to get some producers download your scripts on Inktip or the Blacklist and maybe even come back to you and say, hey, I liked your script. What else do you have? I mean, these are the indications that you're sort of on the right track and that you're starting to make some progress. And I know navigating this can be tricky. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. There's a lot of nuance to it, but that's part of why writing is hard. Again, it's not just about writing and rewriting and self-evaluation. It's the rejection. It's the praise, everything. It's really all of this is part of the process. And again, stepping back and taking a long, hard look at your project and sort of deciding where you stand and being realistic. And then again, improving as a writer and continuing to market your script. So the second point that I want to highlight from the conversation with Shane, and I think it fits right into what I talked about just a moment ago. Shane said, know your end game. He thought through the whole process, the budget level, who would be a good fit to help him produce this film. He even mentioned about, a team in Australia. So he knew sort of where he was best situated with his network to produce this film, who the audience was. He thought through that, who the audience was, and even how to market the film. This is very important. There is the advice that's quite often given that goes something like, write what you know or write what you're passionate about. And I don't see what Shane is saying here as being mutually exclusive to that advice. Again, it's a much more subtle and nuanced thing. Hopefully you can be passionate about the films that have a market. Hopefully you can write scripts from your unique point of view that also have an audience. And I don't want to make this seem like it's simple. It's not always clear which script is more marketable. I've had plenty of people on this podcast who have succeeded without giving any real consideration to who the market was for their film. It can work. But I think your odds are better if you try and think these things through a good bit, as Shane did with his film. And I'll just finish up by mentioning my own thought process on my next project that I'm going to write and direct and produce. Because I know this isn't as simple as it seems. I mean, you listen to a podcast and you hear a guy like me talking and it sounds like I have all the answers, or I'm suggesting this or suggesting that. And it's just, I know it's not that simple. So as I'm winding down the post-production on The Pinch, I have 2 scripts I'm considering doing next. Again, both the scripts are written. So which script am I going to produce and direct? I have a sort of 500 Days of Summer type romantic comedy, which I polished up last winter. It could be shot on a micro budget. It takes place primarily at one sort of a dive bar. And I also have a low budget sexy thriller horror script that I wrote last spring. And I wrote this particular script knowing that I might want to shoot it. So budget was a big consideration. So it was written with a micro budget in mind. So it could definitely be produced on a micro budget as well. So I go back and forth. I like both scripts and I think they both have potential. On the one hand, I think the sexy thriller definitely has a better chance of making its money back. But then on the other hand, I think if it turns out well, I think the romantic comedy probably has more long-term upside for my career, even if it doesn't make its money back. It's a much more thoughtful, artistic film. And even if it's halfway decent, I think it would be a great showcase for my writing and producing and directing. I don't think a low-budget thriller horror film, unless it really blows up, is really ever going to impress too many people in the industry, even if it does make its money back or even makes a small profit. I think sort of there's more cachet in these artistic films. And I think, you know, if I wanted to continue to build on my career and potentially maybe get hired by a producer to write and direct something, I think maybe the romantic comedy would maybe be a better idea. Whereas if I actually want to maybe make a business model where I'm raising the money, producing, writing, and directing, I think maybe the sexy thriller might be a better idea. So again, I'm really torn and I don't have a great answer. I haven't really decided what I'm doing. I go back and forth. I'm probably leaning towards the thriller, mainly because I always have this sort of practical side sort of barking at me. But the romantic comedy feels a little bit indulgent because it doesn't feel as business-wise. It doesn't feel like it has as good a chance of, as I said, making that money, whatever money I personally invest in the film, or even friends and family or whoever, a Kickstarter. It just doesn't feel like the romantic comedy has as much of a chance of actually earning that money back. So I don't know. But then again, you know, maybe making more artistic personal film is the best thing I can do for myself at this stage of the career. So again, I'm really torn on this and I don't have all the answers. And so I don't want to just like drop this podcast and make it seem like, you know, I have all the answers. I don't. And I'm wading through a lot of this, these thoughts that I have on the podcast. You know, there's just the thoughts that occur to me now. Next week, I might change a little bit and I might be firmly decided to go one way or another. And again, I just mentioned this because I don't want people to think that, you know, listening to podcasts or anybody in the industry, no matter how successful, they're the ones that has all the answers. Ultimately, these things are personal decisions, and you've got to look at your own situation and your own goals and your own, you know, abilities and skills and talent and experiences, and sort of figure this out for yourself. There is no easy right answer to any of this. You know, it's really what writing and screenwriting is all about. I mean, from the smallest decision in your script, like naming a minor character, all the way up to trying to decide if a concept has an audience. You know, writing is about navigating, you know, difficult waters where there's not clear cut, you know, correct or so-called right answers. It's just about making decisions and trying to, you know, use your experience and get better and make better decisions. And hopefully that will result in a better screenplay. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.